Hello and welcome to Miguel Delaney's Inside Football, edition 6 of this videocast. That is, of course, a compliment to my newsletter of the same name for The Independent that you can subscribe to, and my general work for The Independent. And this will serve as an exploration of the headlines and the big themes of any given week. And right now, I'm just back from a windswept Stamford Bridge, as you can probably tell from my hair right now. And stormy conditions that I think contributed to what was a chaotic end to the game, at least, that could have gone either way, but that Chelsea seized. I have to say, I actually thought Chelsea deserved it from the way it ended, and that actually ties into, I suppose, what I really want to talk about, and what's very interesting at this early stage of the season, which is in contrast to, I think, the clarity with which Chelsea worked at the end of this game. The champions, Liverpool, have a team that currently doesn't make sense, and are in a situation where, bizarrely, we don't know what their best formation is. And I do think this was something, it's been signposted for some time, and it was something that was very much manifest towards the end of this game. I suppose it's a clear example of what I'm talking about here. And actually, I do feel I should obviously give Chelsea some credit. I mean, it's easier to talk about the negatives, and people will obviously, talk about how we're only focused on one club. But in this case, I do think Maresca, who ended up getting sent off, offered one of his best individual managerial performances or individual coaching performances. So, I mean, if you zoom out with Chelsea, say, in contrast to Liverpool, who are seen as building to a grander vision, Chelsea's private equity ownership obviously have a new and distinctive approach to recruitment. There can sometimes feel an element of randomness about that, even if people within the club would deny it. But it certainly doesn't feel like they're building towards a 3-4 year cycle. There's constant movement, and obviously that's relevant to PSR constraints. So this isn't a traditional way to build a team. Allied to that, I would say, I wouldn't necessarily put Maresca right now up there as one of the elite coaches. I think he's a good coach, as he did prove in this game. But I would have considered that maybe a bit of a disadvantage, or at least kind of, one of the reasons why you wouldn't necessarily have Chelsea as high as potential title challengers as their rivals. But in this game, despite all of that, as it ticked towards, say, the hour mark, or from the 55 minutes around when Gakpo had got his equaliser, and it was a bit of a back and forth, it could have gone either way, but I think the reason it went Chelsea's way and why the momentum of the game shifted, because I think it was much clearer to Maresca what he needed to do. I think all of his subs were inspired and paid off, particularly those of Romeo Lavia, who I think restored Chelsea's control in midfield. Caicedo was brilliant early on, got that superb goal. Malo Gusto was a masterstroke from Maresca to play him in the middle. Chelsea went man-to-man against Liverpool when Liverpool had the ball, but Gusto often did the work of multiple men. But just at the moment when that was subsiding, he introduced Lavia, who I think restored that. From there as well, then there was Estevao. And just at the moment where I suppose maybe people were anticipating that one of Liverpool's new stars could finally have one of their launch moments, it was Chelsea's newest and brightest hope that actually seized the game and had his launch moment. A big goal for a very talented young player's career. He'd offered a few signs of that beforehand. So yeah, I mean, everything Maresca did, or most of what Maresca did in this game, turned the game in Chelsea's way. Whereas in contrast to that, it did feel like everything Slot did, right down to ending the game with two midfielders as part of his back four, it just complicated things from Liverpool. And that follows on from what I say is one of the most interesting things about this part of the season, which is the champions. As a team, they don't currently make sense. And it's a bit difficult, actually, to figure out what their best formation, what their best team currently is, which is remarkable when you're talking about a club that has just, signed 2 players or 3 players that could be considered game changers. Ekitike, Wirtz, and obviously the biggest one of all, Alexander Isak. Instead, there's this disconnect in the team, and I think manifested in, there were so many bad passes. I mean, I said during the game, or I posted on social media, I can't remember a Liverpool game where so many of their players had just so many kind of duff passes, to which I got a lot of responses that 4 days ago. I was actually at the Chelsea game while Liverpool were losing to Galatasaray. Yeah, but that did feel a reflection of a team that doesn't currently make sense. And look, this isn't to say that Slot doesn't have an idea for this team in mind. It's that right now, on current conditions, it doesn't really work. And look, there's all sorts of caveats to this. Liverpool are just 1 point behind in the title race and are champions. There's obviously you've got all these new players that actually have to bed in, and Slot himself did talk about how in the current calendar it's actually difficult to train or to coach in the usual way because this game's so frequent. I've discussed before on the videocast that Arteta has been particularly conscious of this. The chemistry of the team has obviously changed. I think there's a lot of individuals who are on either bad form or not, 100% sharp, or else just adapting as well to the change in theme. I think the absence of Trent Alexander-Arnold has obviously affected Salah's game as he also seeks to get in tune with a new attack. And I think he has found himself out wide a lot more and just doesn't look as confident. You can see that in some of his finishing. Van Dijk hasn't been as most imperious. The team is looking more vulnerable. I think we're waiting to see Alexis McAllister get back to full fitness. And of course, on top of all this is something that people don't really want to mention for understandable reasons because it's real world tragedy that is very difficult to actually put in the context of something as comparatively trivial as football. But obviously this is a team adjusting to the grief from the tragic loss of their friend and teammate Diogo Jota. So, I mean, anytime it's brought up, people are going to say it's an excuse. It's not. It's something that this team has to go through on top of all these kind of purely football caveats. And as regards to purely football caveats, these aren't like unfixable problems, obviously. I think they can come good. But they obviously can come good. And Slot is, I know executives who describe him as the most talented coach in the world. But right now, and based on the conditions that are there right now, there are issues. And yes, even if you point to the fact that the champions are only a point behind the leaders, this obviously comes from a situation where they had spent so much money. They'd started the season very well to win those first 5 games and be 5 points clear. Yet within those games, as was discussed a lot, there were warning signs there, especially as regards the vulnerability of the team. And it feels like a lot of this has come together. And in the same way that late goals show character, and they got a lot of those in the early games, they also show, if you keep needing late goals, they're a sign of vulnerabilities in the team or flaws in the team, because you're not performing to the same level that you can win games, in the full 90 minutes. So that's the other side of late goals. And now Liverpool are suffering the other side of that, where they're conceding late goals themselves because there are structural issues in this team. And it is so striking for a team that used to be so, at their best last season, I'd say for a good 4 to 5 months, felt so coherent and in sync. They were like kind of clockwork in the way they worked. Now they're not. I've already just before I came online, I was looking at some heat maps and data that shows that Liverpool's press has gone from one of the most effective in the Premier League to one of the most mediocre, essentially mid-table, and something that Chelsea got out of a lot. That then obviously leads into, I think, one of the bigger issues, which is it feels like everything Liverpool do right now is quite random. So obviously they've got a lot of supremely talented attackers, which means they can produce great moments and some very good spells of football, as we've seen in so many games this season. But it sometimes feels as if that comes from almost kind of an individual instinct and is a bit more off the cuff than the kind of construction you would associate with a Slot team. And that at once means, yes, they can produce fine moments, but on the other side, they've been as vulnerable as they've looked. And so all these performances have been signposted. These defeats have been signposted. So hence, we go from a situation where they score so many late goals to where they've conceded stoppage time goals for 2 Premier League games in a row, for a third successive defeat in all competitions. And okay, it's not a true crisis, obviously, but it is one of those classic Premier League crises. They've got a lot to solve. It's not the best to be going into the international break with. Now, I do think Slot will solve these issues. I think Wirtz, who's obviously been such a focus, there's a clear issue there where he hasn't yet adapted to the exact intensity of the Premier League or what it entails and the greater demands of playing for Liverpool in this schedule. But I think that's led to another issue where he keeps being played in midfield in a 3, and I don't think he's fully suited to that right now. It feels like actually the best place to play him would be in attack. But then, of course, Liverpool have to fit all of these expensive attackers into that front line. And this is, I suppose, where we get to the bigger question of how the formation doesn't currently work. Or as a few people said to me today, some within football, that the formation might work best without Mohamed Salah, which would usually be considered sacrilege. But you can see the sense to it. It's strange, but like Salah is from a team, or his best performance from a team where he had Trent Alexander-Arnold beside him, and now Liverpool are looking to something else that they haven't fully figured out yet. Isak's obviously another one. I mean, to be fair, Salah, it should be acknowledged that he put in one brilliant ball for Isak in the first half that the striker headed over. It does point to kind of just this nature of an instinctive element of performance where you can see their quality manifest in certain moments, but they're not fully on form. I think that's classic with Salah, and the offset with so many poor finishes. Isak obviously clearly isn't fit either to compound Wirtz's adaptation. And it's Ekitike who's obviously the forward who has, or the new player that is fitted best, and they've got an issue with the fullbacks as well. In fact, essentially, they're internalizing a new approach to try and I suppose replace the effect of Robertson and Alexander-Arnold without doing exactly the same thing. Now, in any normal situation, this is transition, which would be difficult, but of course, it does feel like there's a different perspective on it, a different expectation. A, because Liverpool are champions, and B, because of the way they started the season, and this expectation of how when you spend a lot of money in modern football at the top clubs, the effect should be more instantaneous. And again, it's why I don't have any long-term concerns for Liverpool, but there is an issue now that could very well be decisive to the title race. And I know football discussion can be given to extremes and swings that this videocast and my work would hopefully try and work against. But suddenly now we're in this situation where we've gone from 2 weeks ago where I was talking about a lot of the hysterical discussion around Arsenal to now where I suppose there's this perspective that maybe with Arsenal having the most settled side and most used to a title race, that there's a risk that they could go, a risk for everyone else that they can go on the kind of run that Liverpool did last season. But to be fair, I did say in that Arsenal video earlier that I fancy them for the title. I did from the start of the season. I think for a lot of reasons, because they're more settled and because they've got a squad that can weather this schedule. But that's the key issue for Liverpool is related to this discussion is that by the time Slot gets this as he wants it, and I asked him after the game about how close he is to his ideal, he did say you're never close, but you're always striving for it. And games like this make it more difficult. But until he gets as close as he wants, there is at least a risk that suddenly there could be a gap between themselves and Arsenal. I mean, it's interesting. Next up for Liverpool is a home game against Manchester United. And a few weeks ago, I would almost said, like, this is almost one of the most predictable games you're going to get, despite Liverpool's issues, that United's issues are obviously far greater. But Amorim's sides do tend to, or while he's been at Manchester United, they tended to adapt better to teams with superior talent who will take the game to you. And Liverpool suddenly have a lot to work through. And like this is where I'm saying about this risk, where Arsenal have a run of notionally more forgiving games. And suddenly Slot has a lot to think about over this international break. Because right now, if you're trying to picture what Liverpool's best team is, if you're trying to pick out 11 players that he was put forward as an ideal from that side and how they fit together, I currently can't work it out. There's a lot of talent there, but at the moment, it doesn't look like a team that makes full sense. Slot is someone who can fix this, but he's got a lot of fixing to do. Thank you. See you next time. Oh, and please like and subscribe. Thank you.